My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. Today's Father's Day, and so I'd like to talk about some of my feelings today about Father's Day. In some ways, this is a difficult day for me. I lost my father a few years ago, and one of the things I realize is that my father becomes more and more intelligent as the years go by. Because as I start to see life, I start to see, why my father told me the things he did. And I also realize that sometimes being a father, I know being a parent is a thankless job, but I also think being a father might be more of a thankless job in a lot of ways. I don't think fathers are respected as much in our society as they should be. I think Father's Day itself, I think there's studies out there saying that people spend about 40% less money on a father, and it becomes more about, again, what the father's going to do for the family rather than what the family's going to do for the father. Fathers just are not celebrated as much, and unfortunately, throughout my life, I've been one of the causes of that. One of the things I was thinking about lately for some reason is that a long time ago, I did a running race. It was about 10 miles. And I did really well. And, at the finish line, my mom greets me with a smile and a hug and all these kinds of things. Probably gives me some type of candy or treat, for running this great race. All happy. Who wouldn't want to be around a parent like that? My father was angry because he was really paying attention, and he was there at the finish line, and he heard my time, and my time was about 3 minutes slower than it was previously in another race, and he wanted to know why I did not perform up to expectations. And of course that made me feel bad. So when you're young, you start to say, Mom makes me feel good, Dad makes me feel bad, I don't like Dad. But as you go on through life, you know that your mom has your role, absolutely. But the role that my dad has sometimes was to bring out the best in me. And it's a really hard thing to do because you know that you're not going to be liked. You might not even be cared about. You might even be told that you're a horrible person and you're hated. But you do it anyway because you know that that's the best thing for your child. And he asked me, he said, why did you perform so poorly? What did you do or what did you not do? He goes, we take the time to take you to these races. We pay for you to do these races, and you're not taking it seriously. And I thought, Dad, it's only 3 minutes. What's the big deal? So I lied. I said I did the best I could. I didn't. He knew better. I was into music back then, too. I was just starting as a kid, loving music, and they had no YouTube back then. You couldn't watch videos. And I didn't know if it was Don Kirshner's rock concert or a midnight special, doesn't matter, but it was late, and they had a video, and they were going to play a video of Jim Morrison and the Doors. I've heard of them, but I've never seen them, and I was so intrigued, I really wanted to see it. So I stayed up. I probably went to bed about 1 o'clock in the morning, and the race is about 8. So no, my father knew, and he was right. I did not perform because I did not give my best. And I could talk about that in a million different ways, about the ways that fathers, or at least my father, has pushed me or to make me a better person, and I resented it for a lot of times. But I've grown to appreciate it. It takes a lot of guts to be a good father, especially in our society. So today was a good day. This is why it's mixed. So today, I have played the role of a father, or stepfather, or a male model, role model, 3 times in my life. Unfortunately, the way life is, I've never been able to biologically have my own children. So today I want to make the show a lot about, honoring stepfathers too, because I think that's even more of a thankless job. And I know that there's a lot of great stepfathers out there with a lot of great families. You know, growing up, I've seen some of them. Some of them are so good, you wouldn't know that they're stepfathers, the way their family might be a blended family, but it's such an incredibly loving, cohesive unit that you would never know. And that's amazing when it can happen. But on the other side of that, it's very, very difficult for that to happen. And I wish I knew some of the things that I know now in order to maybe, look for ways to make that better. So today, my girlfriend and I and her daughter, who I feel like is my daughter, plus it's her birthday today, so today was a really good day. So we had part of the day, for her later on with the cake and all that. But she indulged me with wanting, because for Father's Day, I wanted to go to the lion habitat. Of course, where else can you see more masculinity than that? And I love going there. So we went there and we had a really good time today. And that's the good part about being a strong male role model. That's a good part, like days like today, that really works out well. So I'm very appreciative of that, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a cautionary tale later as we go, because I want to be fully open and honest. I should have said this before, but today I want to talk as a human, as a person. I want to throw out this thing of being a therapist, because somewhere in our society we have this thought that therapists are not allowed to have opinions, thoughts, and perceptions, without being attacked. You're being judgmental. It's not being judgmental. I'm talking about anecdotal evidence, if you want to call it that, my own life. So I'm going to throw that in there. So today, Lion Habitat Ranch. What kind of fathers are these Lion Kings that you see behind me? Although she's a lioness that you see over there. Well, they do a lot of things. They protect the pride, and they do this by patrolling the territory. The lionesses do most of the hunting, but they can't do the hunting without the place being cleared of the major predators that are there. So their hunting really is dependent upon the males being strong enough to clear out the territory for them and their cubs. So basically they're there for protection. They do patrol, and they patrol for other male lions, and they always have fights to the death. So their life is on the line all the time. And in order to support a bunch of cubs and lionesses, you're going to need food. A gazelle is not going to handle it. You're going to have to take down something like a Cape buffalo that weighs maybe 12, 13, 1,400 pounds. So you need the male lion to do that. Without that, you have no pride. Male lions don't spend a lot of time with the pride because they're patrolling and they're out hunting, which I think coincides a lot with a lot of people think about what men should be as fathers, with work. I think a lot of men would want to spend more time with their children, but unfortunately, sometimes you can't when you're trying to support. Another interesting thing that male lions do when they take over a territory is they go in and they kill all the cubs. And they do this because lions are not stepfathers. They refuse to use resources to continue somebody else's bloodline. So they won't do that. It also can create a little bit of difficulty down the line because they're not their biological offspring. When the other lions get older, they may not have a family unit. They actually may go and attack the male lion. So they do this for a few different reasons. Let's take a look at more in nature as well, like cuckoo birds. A cuckoo bird lays their eggs in another bird's nest. So what they're doing is they're trying to trick another bird into raising their offspring. Now in humans, sometimes the role of the stepfather, it is to raise kids. And unfortunately, if you're in the wrong situation, you're raising somebody else's kids who may be an absent father, and you're taking over, and you're doing all the things, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, financially, and you may or may not ever be considered to be a real father. not just in the family itself, but legally or socially. I've noticed this a lot of times. When I was raising kids for 10 years, people would be like, should I say Happy Father's Day to you? I'm like, oh, of course you can. What makes the difference? Like, there's a big difference between donating sperm and donating, or even for a woman, donating an egg, between being a parent. I took a lot of pride in being a parent, and it just seems that sometimes our society doesn't really care much about step-parents. There are some difficulties in being a stepfather, and I'm sure a stepmother too, but today's Father's Day, and I just want to talk a little bit about stepfathers. Not always, but typically the mother's relationship is going to be stronger with their biological kids than with the stepfather. Not always, but it's possible, and that creates damage in the whole family unit. Most marriage and family therapists would tell you that the strength of the family is based upon the hierarchy, where the mother and father at the top are most important and the kids are subordinate to that. The best thing you can give your kids is a loving, productive, supportive relationship between the mother and the father. But a lot of times with step-parents and blended families, this doesn't happen, and that would be a problem. That's just one issue about being a stepfather. There's discipline problems. Most of the time the mother will be making the rules. Again, not always, but when the chips are down, if you want to be a good father, like I was saying my father was, he was able to say the tough thing, say the thing that's going to be, that no one's going to like him. It's hard to be a stepfather and say things that people are not going to like you or they're going to hate you. Can't really do that. I'm not saying it never happens, but for the most part, the mother will probably be protective of the kids. And when it comes down to a major decision, she's probably going to be the one to make it, maybe. Me being a stepfather, I never thought about the term stepfather. I hated it. In the situations that I was in, it was more about stepping up to be a real father, being a real parent. Like I said before, I thought it was always more important than donating sperm or the mother donating an egg. I think there's a lot of ways to support children and to be a good role model in that. And unfortunately, sometimes, or fortunately, you can actually be a better parent than the biological parents, but it's rare if anybody would notice that. Let me give you some more personal experiences that I've had as being a step-parent. And I want to talk about if you ever want to be a step-parent, you have to look at a couple of things, right? Like, what kind of person would be a step-parent? And it's usually a real kind, compassionate kind of person, an empathetic person, especially a man who's willing to take over somebody else's family. Because if you're in a relationship with a woman, like, why would you overly judge her and leave because, quote unquote, she has children or baggage? So that typically, those words wouldn't be said by a loving person who wants to be a stepfather. But a person who's like that is also very emotionally connected, and they're very much into their heart and soul. So that makes them very, very vulnerable to being hurt from a few of the things that I've already told you, especially the disillusion of the relationship. If the relationship ends with the mother, it's possible to still have a relationship with the children, but you have no legal right to that. And most of the time, they're going to side with the biological parent. And you have to understand that before you get into it. I was friends with a single mom a long time ago. Totally platonic. We used to work out together. And she got divorced. She was going through problems, and she couldn't support the apartment that she was living in, her 2 kids. And being that she was my workout partner, and I was hearing about this, what I would do is, without verbally saying it or even asking her, in between clients or in the morning early, I would go over with an envelope with money to pay her rent, and I would slide it under the door, I would tape it to the door. And I did this for a long time because I wanted to. My mother obviously was a single mom, and so I have feelings about that. And so I thought that this is a way, I didn't want to judge her, and I wanted to help, so that's what I did. If the kids needed to go on a school trip, like a track meet in a different state, and she couldn't afford that, You know, I tried to make it possible for her kids to be able to live a better life and have more opportunities. Eventually, I had to move in with me, and we did have a relationship. And she had a part-time job. She wouldn't have been able to make it on her own either. So what I did was I supported her for a long time for her to be able to get a full-time job. And when she got the full-time job, I still didn't charge her any rent or anything like that. I didn't have her share the bills with me, even though we were married. I did not do that. I figured I was handling it before. This is what I'm going to do. I want everybody to have an upgrade in their life. I didn't want to be a negative in any way. That's, at least at the time, that's what I thought, how I should handle it. To give you some examples, I could name 1,000, but let me show you what it's like to be a stepfather. They would go to see their father, and he would have a lot of negative. And you know, one of the things that you have to look at is that there's a good chance that a step parent, or I mean the biological parent, is still going to be a major part of your life. And in a lot of ways, they can have more power than the step-parent does. So for whatever reason he said, I don't know, but I think I probably wanted the kids to go to bed at a certain or reasonable hour. You know, and one of them got angry at me for wanting them to go to sleep. So they called the cops on me. Now, I get that. Kids can call the cops on parents, you know, it happens. But usually they might go and they might ask you a couple of questions. But this is not what it was, because being I was a step-parent, I had one cop, and I went to open up the door, and I had one cop in front of me. And I looked to the side, and I saw there was a cop in my garden hiding back, and he had his gun drawn on me. And I just got so angry, I just didn't care. I just said, hey man, get out of my garden. You know, what do you do with the gun? You know, well, can we talk to your kids? I'm like, yeah. So I'm just saying, I think that I would have been treated a lot different if I was a quote unquote a parent and not a step parent. And again, a step parent is a father. So again, coming there with guns drawn, again, I know there's a lot of talk these days about defunding the police, but it's really not defunding. What they mean is by augmenting the police, that 2 or 3 police should not show up with guns drawn on me because I wanted my kids to go to bed before 10 o'clock on a school night, right? What they should do is show up with a social worker or at least a marriage and family therapist and maybe one cop. And how about not having your guns drawn, you know? treat a person like a decent person, you know, unless proven otherwise, of course. There's a lot. You know, I was looking through some pictures, you know, through the years, you know, because my wife ended up, she died 14 years ago. So I'm talking about, this is a long time ago. And when I was talking about the other part, that was back in like 1997, 98. So this is a long, long time ago. You know, the trips to Disneyland, Hawaii, New York, Japan. You know, I gave up part of my bodybuilding career because bodybuilding costs a lot of money. And I wanted the kids to be able to do things and to go on other vacations. I didn't want it to be around me, traveling around the country doing bodybuilding. I thought that was stupid. So I gave up a lot of that as well. And then, you know, my wife at the time, she died. So what happens then? What happens is after the funeral is that I end up being a middle-aged man with a 16-year-old girl in my house. That's what happens because I didn't legally adopt, which I couldn't because the father would not allow that. Now the father spent the whole 10 years or so avoiding paying child support, you know, getting like construction jobs where he could work off the books. But of course, when this happened, he shows up like a knight in shining armor and everybody's like, well, you know, including kid, because she decided she wanted to make rules. You know, she was going to call the cops on me too whenever I set rules, you know, tell the cops that I was trying to sexually abuse her. These are the things that can happen to a step-parent. She ends up moving in with her father. But here's the kicker of it. He owed thousands of dollars in back child support and it all gets wiped away. Why? Because the child support never goes to me even though I'm the one paying. So what happens is that because the wife died, the child support technically goes to her to pay for the children. Well, there's no children. They moved, one of them moved with him, which means that he was entitled to $1,000 a month. So she was about 16, so let's do quick math. That's about 24 months that he was going to be able to potentially have his child under his roof, and he was going to get paid a check for $24,000. He owed all the money, that disappeared, and now the government's going to give him $24,000 to take care of his kid because he's the real father. So that's how some of this works. And of course, he didn't have any money, and so I ended up having to pay him to be able to take his kid back to a trailer park in Yuma, Arizona. So that's part of my experience with that. I'm trying to leave out all the major stuff because I don't want to put the kids in this or any way. But I'm just telling you, as a, you know, the way the father can jump in, it's his biology, right? Like nobody cared about the fact that I was the one taking care of this whole family for all these years. So there's just a cautionary tale. Again, I've had some great moments, including today, as being a quote unquote a stepfather or a positive, strong male role model, and I've loved it. I loved it when my niece lived with me too. That was great. I look upon those years as some of the best of my life, you know, to be able to come home and it was like multiple kids in the house, and you know, it was just really fun and exciting, and I enjoyed that role. But it's also a cautionary tale because there's other difficulties that you know people need to know. And again, we should have a special, you know, thank you for the stepfathers out there, because I think their job is not harder, but potentially harder. So I hope today's show was valuable for you. And again, I want to just say a happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and especially stepfathers. And, you know, of course, you know, to my dad. So hopefully you can subscribe, and if you like the content, please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you. Bye.